afternoon to everyone watching us live right now. We will begin the annual stockholders meeting with the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang mag-ibig, helas ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng bagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pamay di magtitingin, luman ang araw ng walhagin pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na pagkay mga aking, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Welcome to the 2022 Annual Stockholders Meeting of SM Investments Corporation. With us this afternoon is our Board of Directors. Our Chairman of the Board, Mr. Jose T. Sho. Our Vice Chairpersons, Ms. Teresita T.C. and Mr. Henry T.C. Jr. Mr. Harley T.C., Executive Director. Mr. Alfredo E. Pascual, Lead Independent Director. Ms. Tomasa H. Lapana, Independent Director. Mr. Robert G. Vergara, Independent Director. And lastly, our President, Mr. Frederick C. Dabuncio. Also with us is our Corporate Secretary, Attorney Elma B. Serrano. Our Assistant Corporate Secretary and SVP for Legal, Attorney Arthur C. And our SVP for Finance, Mr. Franklin C. Gomez. We would also like to acknowledge our advisors to the board, Ms. Elizabeth T.C., Mr. Hans T.C., Mr. Herbert T.C., Mr. Gregory L. Domingo, and Mr. Roberto G. Manabat. I now turn over the meeting to our chairman, Mr. Jose T. Sho.
Good afternoon, shareholders, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the annual stockholder meeting of SM Investment Corporation, streaming live this afternoon. To you, our stockholder, thank you for registering online, for joining us today, and for voting. I know that you are fully understand that we have to comply with government directives on social distancing for safety of everyone. I trust that you are all well and safe. We have opened the chat box so you can raise your question or comments. In case your questions are not addressed this afternoon, our investor relations team will endeavor to reach and answer your question via email. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual stockholder meeting of SM Investment Corporation is now called to order. Mr. Secretary, before we proceed, please certify to the posting and publication of notice and existing of a quorum.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to everyone tuned in. In compliance with the rules issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission, I certify that notice of this meeting, the definitive information statement, along with the company's guidelines for participation via remote communication and voting in absentia, were uploaded via the PSE Edge and posted on the company's website. In addition, the notice of this meeting was published on April 4 and 5, 2022, both in print and online format, in the business section of the Manila Times and at the property and infrastructure section of the Business World. Mr. Chair, stockholders who have registered and are participating in this meeting, personally and by proxy, represent 1,085,113,977 common shares, constituting 90.08% of the total outstanding capital stock of the company as of record date March 28, 2022. I therefore certify that we have a quorum for this meeting. We would also like to inform the stockholders that CSIP Gores Velayo and Company, or SGV, has been engaged as third-party tabulator of votes cast for today's meeting. Finally, we'd like to inform our shareholders and other participants that this meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This item in the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the last annual stockholder meeting. Mr. Secretary, were copies of the minutes provided to all stockholders?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Copies of the minutes of the stockholders meeting held on April 28, 2021 were posted on the company's website soon after its adjournment last year. Copies of the minutes were also appended to the definitive information statement posted on the PSE Edge and the company's website. The minutes reflect the proceedings of the last annual meeting, including resolutions adopted and approved, with corresponding tabulation of votes for each item, then for approval.
Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting are being presented for approval. Mr. Secretary, do you have the result of the voting?
Yes, Mr. Chair. For the record, unqualified votes cast for each item for approval at today's meeting shall be counted in favor of the matter under consideration. Based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning shares representing 90.04% of the total outstanding capital stock of the company voted in favor of approval of the minutes.
Thank you. The motion is carried and the minutes are approved. Mr. Secretary, please ensure that the minutes of today's meeting reflect the tabulation of votes for all agenda items requiring stockholders' approval.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
The next item in the agenda is the approval of the 2021 annual report and audited financial statement. May I request our President, Mr. Frederick Diboncio, to present the annual report for 2021.
Good afternoon, dear shareholders. Allow me to report on our performance for 2021 and how we continue to be strong by working together with and supporting our stakeholders. In 2021, we continued to grow, helping pave the way towards meaningful recovery. We created impact on nationwide vaccination, economic support for the supply chain and MSMEs, as well as on disaster response and climate action. The Philippines posted an economic growth of 5.6% last year. Supported by a rebound in consumer sentiment in the fourth quarter, we delivered growth of 9% in revenues to 428.1 billion pesos and 65% in net income to 38.5 billion pesos. This reflects our fundamental relevance to Filipino consumers as we continue to be a proxy for Philippine recovery. Our strong financial performance last year was driven by all three core businesses: retailing, banking, and property, as well as an increasing contribution to our consolidated earnings from our portfolio investments. Banking delivered just over half of our net income. Property contributed 25%, while retail pitched in 17%. Notably, our portfolio investments contributed 7% collectively. We also continue to build our asset base and to maintain a prudent balance sheet. Our assets increased 10% to 1.34 trillion pesos, and our gearing remained at 38% net debt to 62% total equity. We continued to invest and grow our retail footprint in 2021. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, we opened 294 new retail stores. In particular, Alphamart surpassed 1,200 stores. Our retail business reported an increase in net income by 133%, largely on sustained growth of our department and specialty stores. Food formats, meanwhile, continued to deliver stable revenues and improved net income of 31% through a tight focus on operating costs and efficiencies. We also continued to adapt new online and delivery channels from customers, which accounted for 10% of our non-food sales. In property, we launched nearly 12,000 residential units and added over 250,000 square meters of new floor areas to our malls. This, as net income grew 21% for our property business, would improve consumer sentiment. Our combined mall businesses registered 6% growth in revenues to 30.1 billion pesos in 2021 as local mobility restrictions eased in the latter part of the year and with the return to normalcy in China. SM Prime launched two malls, SM City Diet in Camarines Norte and SM City Grand Central in Caloocan City. It also opened MOA Square, the commercial space beside the SM Mall of Asia, which houses the first IKEA store in the Philippines and the biggest IKEA in the world. SM Prime's residential business, led by SM Development Corporation, recorded 45.9 billion pesos in revenues on the back of sales take-up of 98.9 billion pesos in 2021. SMDC launched 8 new high-rise and mid-rise condominiums and house and lot projects. This includes a new residential office with a live-at-work concept called Ice Tower at the Mall of Asia complex, and a new mid-rise garden community called Glade Residences in the Emerging Innovation Hub in Iloilo. Our banks delivered sustained net income growth from their core businesses, which enabled them to report strong balance sheets as well. BDO's net income was up 51% and returned to pre-pandemic levels. Net interest income was stable despite lower yields due to excess market liquidity, while their non-interest income was up 11%. They remained well-positioned against any pandemic losses from borrowers with an NPL coverage ratio at 111%. BDO also made considerable investment in digital technology last year. China Bank similarly shared a strong story with net income up by 25% as they grew core businesses and managed their cost base well. Net interest income was up by 13% and fee income was up 3%. NPL coverage was also above 100% at 116%. We've always invested to expand, even in challenging years, knowing the long-term opportunities that the Philippines holds. We also know that we can fulfill the growing needs of millions of underserved Filipinos, whether in modern retail, integrated property development, financial access, or other emerging services. As an example, we increased our ownership in our portfolio companies. Among them is a heritage bake shop chain Goldilocks and To Go, the leading logistics company in the country. We believe these companies have strong assets, strong growth potential, and synergize well with our other businesses. This group of businesses now account for 7% for consolidated earnings, and we are looking to grow the portfolio. For shareholder consideration shortly, we plan to acquire control of Philippine Geothermal Production Company, which would add significant and sustainable geothermal steam energy-related assets to the portfolio. Health and safety continue to be our priority. Our health and safety protocols across our malls, stores, bank branches, and operations centers across the group ensure that these were safe locations for all. Over 120,000 of our employees have been fully vaccinated. In partnership with the local government, our malls serve as convenient and accessible venues where the community can get vaccinated safely. This multi-vaccination program prioritizes health workers, frontliners, senior citizens, and other priority groups identified by the government. By the end of 2021, there were over 7.2 million vaccine doses delivered to the broader population across 72 SM malls nationwide. Our mall business in particular and our retail business continue to provide relief to our tenants and broad support to our many suppliers. We offered advice and access to markets for the many thousands of MSMEs in our network, helping them with new channels and ways to deliver their products and services to customers. We continue to enhance our digital and delivery options in all our businesses, ensuring continuity of service. As a country that is one of the smallest contributors to global climate change, the Philippines happens to be one of the most vulnerable to its harsh effects. 2021 saw us stepping up our response to climate change. We joined the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures, making clear our strong support for private sector action and transparency in our own programs. We practice disaster resilience planning across all our developments, with SM Prime taking a leading role in UN Arise, the private sector body for disaster planning and resilience. We continue to evaluate our energy use across the group and identify ways where we can be more efficient and where we can lead as an advocate. SM Prime made one of the boldest announcements related to energy usage in the country to date, committing that 50% of its energy will be provided by renewable sources by end 2022. Another of our businesses, NEO, became the first building development portfolio in the world to be certified as net zero carbon under the EDGE program of the IFC. Our bank, BDO, continues to lead in financing renewable energy projects nationwide. We strongly advocate private sector action and collaboration with the public sector on climate concerns. For the third time in September, we co-hosted a sustainability conference with the Global Reporting Initiative, bringing together our peers and government members across the ASEAN region. Going forward into the future, we recognize that protecting our environment will be one of the biggest challenges we will continue to face. As we neared Christmas, our country was faced with the onslaught of Typhoon Odette, which affected several cities and the lives of millions of Filipinos. As a swift response, our companies came together to help provide relief goods and shelter for the impacted communities. SM Foundation led the response to our community's needs for humanitarian relief through a distribution of over 38,000 kalinga or relief packs to more than 35 barangays in the affected areas. SM Malls provided temporary shelter to customers and nearby residents, offering free Wi-Fi, charging stations, drinking water and light snacks, free overnight parking, and help desks to aid in serving those affected by the typhoon. To Go, our logistics arm, worked closely with utility companies to bring critical equipment to the region to help restore electricity and basic services. They work closely with other corporates and charitable organizations to deliver relief and assistance. Airspeed, our other logistics company, offered its air freight forwarding services and trucks to bring tons of essential cargo, while its warehouses in Manila and Cebu were used to store relief goods coming from various organizations nationwide for free. It flew truckloads of bottled water immediately provided by SM companies to Cebu in light of the water shortage in the typhoon hit region. As we closed the year, we were recognized by leading industry bodies like the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard, the Asset Magazine, and Investor Relations Magazine for our responsible business practices and high governance standards. We were also recognized as a leader in sustainability by organizations such as Sustainalytics and FTSE4Good. We remain committed to advancing the principles of the UN Global Compact and to contributing material actions towards the UN Sustainability Development Goals. As we are recognized for our contributions, we also wish to recognize and express our gratitude to the many stakeholders who have helped us make a difference during this past year. We thank our employees for their hard work and dedication to our customers, our business partners for their support and cooperation, our private sector agencies and public sector peers for working with us to address our urgent common needs, and finally, our shareholders for their support toward SM and their continuing trust in us. It is a trust that empowers us to sustain and strengthen our commitment to serving our millions of customers and to keeping to our sustainability goals as we grow into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The 2021 annual report and the 2021 audited financial statement of the company are being presented for approval. Mr. Secretary, please announce the results of the votings.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Based on the tally of votes, stockholders owning shares representing 89.96% voted in favor of approval of the 2021 annual report and the 2021 audited financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The 2021 annual report and 2021 audited financial statement of SM Investment Corporation are therefore approved. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a board meeting earlier today, and I am pleased to announce that your board has approved the declaration of cash dividend amounting to approximately 7.5 billion total, or an equivalent of 6 pesos and 25 cents per share, in favor of all the stockholders of record as of May 13, 2022, payable on May 26, 2022. We now proceed to the question and answer portion of today's proceedings. All stockholders of record were allowed to submit questions via email and through the chat box of this live stream. Again, we thank our stockholders for sending their questions and comments. We will now answer those questions. Mr. Secretary, please read some of the questions received.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I will now read questions from stockholders received via email. The first question is from Jasper Jimenez, and it reads, how is SMIC positioning for the future? Is it making a bid to be a major power player in the country with the acquisition of PGPC?
Our acquisition into Philippine Geothermal Production Company reflects our commitment to sustainability and our strong support to promote clean energy. This acquisition will further enhance our sustainability portfolio and exposure. It is a one-off transaction, even as we continue to be cognizant of companies in the Philippines that have the potential for high growth in the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The next question was sent by the same shareholder. Given the economy's reopening, will SM continue to develop online platforms, and what opportunities do you see moving forward?
In 2021, we saw call to deliver transactions contribute 10% of non-food revenues. This contribution is highly correlated with the prevailing mobility restrictions. With the reopening of the economy, we see a continued increase in brick-and-mortar visits, leading to an increase in mall foot traffic, which we already saw in the latter half of the year. We, however, continue to invest behind online technology and activity as we see e-commerce growing even more long-term. Our malls, too, have ventured online with the launch of SM Malls Online. This app allows mall tenants to sell their goods digitally, fulfilled via delivery or in-store pickup. These fuses are strategically located physical assets with digital services, increasing customer convenience by being able to shop however they want. As we continue to adapt to our customers' preferences, we will continue to combine our strengths in both the physical and online spaces and innovate further into the future to serve our customers better.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chair, that is all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next item on the agenda is the approval and ratification of all the acts of the Board of Directors and Management from April 28, 2021 to the date of this meeting. A summary of these acts is found in the definitive information statement sent to all the stockholders. Mr. Secretary, please announce the voting results.
Yes, Mr. Chair. As tabulated, stockholders owning shares representing 89.95% of the total outstanding capital stock of the company voted in favor of approval of the ratification of all acts of the Board of Directors and Management from April 28, 2021 to the date of today's meeting.
Thank you. The acts of the Board and Management are therefore ratified and approved. The next item in the agenda is the election of directors for 2022 to 2023. May we request the chairman of the Corporate Governance Committee, Mr. Alfredo Pascual, to please read the names of the nominees qualified to be elected to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Corporate Governance Committee has pre-qualified the following nominees for election to the board for 2022-2023. Jose T. Shaw, Teresita T. C., Henry T. C. Jr., Harley T. C., Frederick C. Dibuncio, Alfredo E. Pascual as Independent Director, Tomasa H. Lipana as Independent Director, and Robert G. Vergara as Independent Director.
Thank you, Mr. Pascual. Mr. Secretary, do you have the voting results?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Flash on the screen are the votes garnered by each of the nominees. Since there are only 8 nominees, and with the votes received, all nominees have obtained sufficient votes for election.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congratulations to the newly elected members of the Board of Directors of SM Investment Corporations. We now proceed to the appointment of the external auditor. The audit committee has pre-screened the nomination for external auditor. and recommended the reappointment of SGB as the external auditor for 2022. Mr. Secretary, please announce the voting results.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Based on the tally of votes, stockholders owning shares representing 89.03% of the total outstanding capital stock of the company voted in favor of SGV's appointment as external auditor.
Thank you. SGB is therefore reappointed as external auditor of the company for 2022. The next item in the agenda is the approval of the merger of SM Investment Corporation and All First Equity Holding Inc. with SM Investment Corporation as the surviving entity. Details of the merger are found in the definitive information statement distributed to all the stockholders. Mr. Secretary, please announce the voting result.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning shares representing 83.2% of the total outstanding capital stock of the company voted in favor of approval of the merger of SMIC and All First Equity Holdings Inc. with SMIC as a surviving entity.
Thank you. The motion is carried in the merger of the company with All First Equity Holding Inc. with the company as the surviving entity is hereby approved. For this final item of the agenda called other items, Mr. Secretary, is there any other item in the agenda?
No other matter, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There being no matters in the agenda, we can now adjourn this meeting. We thank everyone who have joined us this afternoon. I hope that you are all in good health and doing well. Stay safe, everyone.
Before we close, can I please request the board of directors to open their cameras for a photo op? Thank you very much. Hope to see you all next year.